What happens when the daughter who stayed becomes the one they try to erase? She paid the bills, fixed the pipes, held the house together, while they handed the deed to her sister with a smile. What she did next changed everything, and no one saw it coming. The smell of cinnamon was thick in the air, almost too thick. The kind of sweet that makes you feel like something's off, like someone's covering rot with vanilla. I was standing over the stove, watching the crust bubble on the pie I made for Mom, and another one cooling for Emily on the counter. I don't even like pie, but I bake it every October because Marlene, my mother, says it makes the house feel warm. Warm. That's a word she used a lot. It never really applied to her. The kitchen light flickered again, like it always does when the fridge kicks in. It's been doing that since 2018, but no one bothers to fix it. I used to think it was because we were all too busy. Turns out no one cared enough to notice. That bulb had more consistency than half the people in this house. I wiped my hands on the old green towel hanging from the oven handle. It had bleach stains, frayed edges, smelled a little like garlic no matter how many times I washed it. But I kept it. It was real. It didn't lie. Behind me, the house groaned. You know that sound when the walls feel like they're holding in more than just heat? That was our house. The wood, the photos on the wall, the dent in the hallway where Dad once kicked a suitcase. They all knew too much. I could feel their silence pressing on my back. I looked at the clock. 7:24 p.m. Marlene would be home soon. And I'd have to ask her, again, about the papers. About the notary appointment she kept brushing off like a gnat she didn't feel like swatting. I already knew she'd dodge, she'd wave a hand, offer some half-smile, change the subject. But I'd ask anyway, because that's what I did. I stayed. I asked. I picked up her prescriptions and paid for them when her card got declined. I cleared the drains, called the plumber, cleaned the fridge. I held this house together with duct tape and denial. And still, every time Emily's name came up, Marlene's whole face would soften, like she was talking about a saint. Emily, my younger sister. Her Highness, the shining star of our family, even though she hadn't been home for more than a weekend in 6 years. She posted videos online about healing energy and charging your spirit through your spine or something equally vague and shiny. People sent her money for it, real money. Meanwhile, I was rinsing out her mother's pill organizer and praying we had enough left for utilities. I walked past the living room, eyeing the TV remote Emily had broken last Christmas. She said it slipped. It didn't. She threw it. She didn't like the news playing while she was manifesting. Marlene didn't say a word, just picked up the pieces and said, "She's just tired." I stopped by the hallway mirror on the way to the door. My hair was pulled into a loose knot. Tired face, sleeves rolled up, flowers still on my collarbone. I looked like someone who baked pies for people who wouldn't thank her. I wasn't sad. Not exactly, more like used up, but still holding. That night, I'd be the one to clear the plates. Again. That night, I'd be the one asking about the legal documents. Again. And that night, like clockwork, Marlene would look me in the eye and pretend not to understand what I meant. What happened after that changed everything. You don't want to miss how it all cracked open. The door creaked open at 7:51. Not late, not early, just perfectly on time to make you wonder if she waited in the car for dramatic effect. Marlene walked in like she didn't just leave me cooking and thinking myself into a corner for 2 hours. She wore that burgundy coat she never washed, the one with the brooch Emily gave her 5 birthdays ago. That thing always caught the light, always reminded me who her favorite was, subtle, like a brick through glass. She didn't say hello, just sighed like the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders somewhere between the pharmacy and our porch. She looked around the kitchen and said, "You didn't forget the cinnamon this time, did you?" I could have thrown the towel at the wall. I didn't. I just smiled. The kind of smile people give in grocery store aisles when they see someone they hate but have to say hi to anyway. "No, I didn't forget," I said. "I also paid your water bill. Again." She didn't answer, just walked to the living room and turned on that yellow lamp with the crooked shade. Sat down on the edge of the couch like she expected someone to interview her. "Tomorrow's the meeting," I said, keeping my voice even. You're still taking me, right? Her eyes narrowed for half a second. That's how you know when Marlene's calculating. She doesn't raise her voice or storm out. She just lets one eye twitch and then rewrites history right in front of you. I told you, it's nothing major, just a formality. I leaned against the counter. A formality for what exactly? She blinked at me, long and slow. Holly, you're being dramatic. There it was. The sentence she used whenever she didn't want to answer something real. The same line she used when I asked why Emily never had to chip in. Why I was the one staying behind while her healing influencer daughter flew first class to Arizona for business retreats. Marlene looked down at her hands. It's not like you want this place anyway. All you do is complain about how much work it takes. That one cut deep. Not because it was loud, but because it was quiet, cruel, and felt rehearsed. Like she'd said it to herself a few times already, testing how it would land. I stepped forward. You think Emily's gonna come back here and shovel snow off the porch in January? You think she's gonna schedule your blood work or clean out the gutters? She flinched, barely. But I saw it. You have your life, Holly, she muttered. Emily has hers. I'm just trying to make things easier when I'm gone. Gone. The word hit like a dropped dish, and somehow she made it sound like I was the problem, like the kid who stayed, cleaned, paid, and kept breathing through it all was still the disappointment. She got up, slowly, walked to the kitchen without a word, and opened the fridge like we hadn't just cracked the wall between us. I stood there, still holding the towel, jaw tight, heart pounding, not from shock, but from recognition. This wasn't new. This was just the first time she said it out loud. And the worst part, she sounded like she meant it. She really believed I didn't belong in this house, the one I kept standing. You think that was the hardest part? No, that was just the first punch. What comes next? That's where it starts to burn. You're going to want to see how this unravels. I didn't sleep that night, not even close. I lay there on that lumpy couch, the one Emily said was too ugly for guests, staring at the ceiling like it owed me answers. The house was silent, but not the kind of peaceful silence. No, it was the kind where even the air feels like it's watching you, waiting to see if you'll break. My thoughts wouldn't quit. They ran laps around my head like angry kids with too much sugar. Every word Marlene had said played back in slow motion, like she'd rehearsed it just to land it where it hurt the most. It's not like you want this place anyway. That line kept scratching at my chest. Over and over, not because I wanted the house, but because I wanted to matter in it. At some point around 2 a.m., I got up and made tea. Not because I needed it, but because boiling water felt like something I could control. The light above the sink flickered again. I didn't bother fixing it, let the bulb have its little tantrum. At least it was honest. In the quiet hum of the kitchen, I caught myself looking at the chair where Dad used to sit. He died 12 years ago, and somehow, he still took up more space in this house than I did. He would have never let things get this twisted. He would have told Marlene straight who showed up, who didn't, who paid the heating bill, who only posted inspirational quotes from a beach in Malibu. But he wasn't here, and the silence he left behind, it gave everyone else too much room to rewrite the truth. The morning sun came in sharp and cold, like it had no interest in being gentle. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at a face that barely felt like mine anymore, tired, lined, not from age, but from bending, shrinking, quieting myself over and over until even the reflection seemed muted. I changed into something clean. I didn't dress up, just neat. I knew Emily would come in all flowing fabric and earth tones, smelling like eucalyptus and attention. She always did. And Marlene would light up the second she walked in, like she'd just seen the second coming in ankle boots. Sure enough, by 9:30, the front door burst open. Emily didn't knock. Of course not. Hall, still making pies? She chirped, like we were old college friends bumping into each other at Whole Foods. Her arms were wide open, like we were filming a reunion. I didn't move. She dropped her vegan duffel bag at the door like it was a statement piece. Everything about her said, I've arrived. Her voice, her perfume, her loud laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I see Mom didn't change anything in here. Still stuck in the 90s, she said, walking around like she was appraising furniture for a garage sale. I watched her like you watch a magician's hands, knowing the trick, but still needing to see it unfold. She hugged Marlene, who let out that breathy laugh she only used for Emily. Then, without missing a beat, they both turned toward me, like I was the quiet girl in the back row of a family photo. Emily tilted her head. Still living here, huh? It wasn't a question. It was a jab, wrapped in lavender oil and fake sisterhood. Marlene chuckled. She likes the quiet. I didn't say a word, just smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone you love, but the kind you give someone who just made it painfully clear. You're not family. You're furniture. And still, I got in that car with them. Still drove to the notary's office. Still held the folder with Mom's paperwork in it like it meant something. Because that's what you do when you're the daughter who stays. You carry the weight even when it's full of other people's names. Everything was about to shift, and no one, absolutely no one, saw what was coming. The notary's office was colder than I remembered. Not temperature-wise, just sterile. Like a waiting room for people who think the word estate makes them important. Off-white walls, fake ficus in the corner, a water cooler that hummed like it resented being alive. I sat there with my hands folded over the manila folder like it was a life vest. Marlene was next to me, flipping through a magazine with that same tight-lipped expression she wore when she didn't want to answer questions. Emily was across the room, legs crossed, scrolling her phone like she was at a salon waiting for highlights. Manifesting abundance, she whispered, tapping on her screen. Marlene smiled at her like it was a sermon. No one said a word to me. A secretary with too bright lipstick popped her head out and called Marlene in. Just her. Emily got up, of course, followed like she'd been invited. I stood too, without thinking. Instinct, maybe. Like a dog hoping to be walked. Marlene turned. No need, Holly. This is just signatures. My hand froze on the chair back. But I brought the folder. She gave me that look, part pity, part annoyance. We've got it. They disappeared behind the frosted glass door. And just like that, I was back in the lobby, sitting alone. The manila folder still clutched in my hands, like some backup prop no one asked for. 15 minutes. That's how long I sat there, staring at the door like it owed me something. Every second felt like someone tightening a screw behind my ribs. I thought of all the forms I'd helped Marlene fill out, all the accounts I'd called to update her passwords, the hospital visits, the prescriptions, the rides to and from every flu shot, every eye exam, every boring, thankless errand. None of it bought me a seat in that room. When they finally came out, Emily looked like she'd just been crowned. Her smile stretched wide, glossy like magazine paper. Marlene's face was neutral, but there was a relief there. A decision finally made. I stood. That's it, Marlene nodded. Just paperwork. Nothing dramatic. I followed them outside like a third wheel on a one-lane road. The fall air hit my chest too hard. Or maybe it was just breathing near them. Emily linked arms with Marlene, already chatting about brunch plans. Not with me, obviously. Sunday's best for me, Emily said. I've got a live stream Saturday, but I'm blocking Sunday off for family. I laughed, couldn't help it. A short, dry sound that barely escaped. Emily turned. Something funny? No, I said, slipping the folder into my tote bag. Just didn't know I was still in the category. She didn't answer. Marlene didn't either. The car ride back was dead quiet. I stared out the window the whole time, watching the leaves burn red and gold, like they were putting on a show no one invited me to. When we pulled into the driveway, Marlene cleared her throat. Thank you for driving. Emily was already halfway to the porch. I'll text you later, Mom. I didn't move. Just sat there in the front seat, hands clenched on the wheel. Marlene turned to me, slow. You've always had a good heart, Holly. And that was it. That was her thank you. Like being decent was something to apologize for. She closed the door and followed Emily inside, leaving me parked in front of the house I'd cleaned, painted, repaired, and protected. The house I thought might, just maybe, one day be mine. I sat there for 10 whole minutes. Then I reached for the folder and opened it, Everything you think you know about loyalty, about fairness, about family, get ready to watch it fall apart. Because what I saw in those papers made me feel something I hadn't in years. Fire, and it didn't care who it burned. I sat there in the driver's seat with the folder open on my lap, the same way you hold a letter you didn't want to get, but can't stop reading. The pages looked innocent enough. Crisp paper, typed neatly, clean little boxes checked off. But every word hit like a shove down a flight of stairs. Marlene had transferred the house, the whole thing, to Emily, not upon death, not to be shared. Just a clean-cut, no-frills handoff. No footnote, no mention of me. I wasn't even a sentence. I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up a long time ago. But my chest, it felt like someone poured concrete into it and forgot to smooth it out. And there I was, sitting in the car I paid insurance on, outside the house I unclogged every winter, reading legal proof that I was nothing but a placeholder. I took a long breath through my nose, that kind of slow, cold inhale people do right before something snaps. Then I did the thing I'd always done. I went inside, not to fight, not to beg, just to see if she'd say it to my face. The door was still ajar. I walked in like I lived there. Funny thing is, I did, but somehow I still felt like I was trespassing. Emily was in the kitchen, barefoot, rummaging through the fridge like she was checking out real estate. Marlene was in the den, feet up, watching a documentary with the sound off, like nothing had just shifted the entire axis of our universe. I leaned in the doorway. So, it's official? Marlene looked up, startled for half a second. Emily didn't even turn around. What do you mean? Marlene asked, too soft, like she was already bracing for the storm. I held up the folder. I read it. Emily finally looked over. Oh, that. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. Marlene sat up straighter. Holly, it's not what you think. I laughed, loud, too loud, the kind that bounces off the walls and dares anyone to say something. You mean it's not a legal transfer of the only thing you own to the daughter who shows up twice a year and thinks cleaning a juicer is character building? Emily crossed her arms. You always make everything about you. No, I said. You just think everything's about you, so when it's not, you get confused. Marlene stood, like that was going to add weight to her next sentence. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at her, hard. But you did. The silence after that was heavy. Not dramatic, just real. The kind where even the house seemed to hold its breath. Marlene finally spoke. Emily has plans. She wants to turn this place into something. She's going to fix it up. She doesn't even know where the breaker box is, I snapped. You think she's going to fix the roof? Replace the water heater? Emily rolled her eyes. You think I can't hire someone? You think money is going to fix everything you've never done? Marlene's voice cracked. You've always been so angry. No, I said, stepping back. I've always been here. And that was it. 3 people in one house, 1 holding the truth, 2 pretending it didn't stink. They thought that was the end of it, a decision made. A quiet fade out. But here's the thing about people like me. People who stay too long and speak too little. When we finally open our mouths, we don't whisper. And I hadn't even started talking yet. You think this was the peak? No, this was just the climb, and every step after this would rattle the bones of this family. The next morning, Emily was already making herself at home, barefoot again, sipping some herbal tea she didn't pay for, wrapped in that ridiculous boho cardigan with the tassels that looked like it came free with a subscription to smugness. She had her laptop open at the dining table, talking to her phone like it was a friend. I'm thinking sage green for the walls, she said, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Maybe strip it back to the bones, make it feel intentional. You know, like lived in but curated. Lived in. That word burned. This wasn't some Pinterest project. This was where I patched the leak in the ceiling with my own hands, where I cried quietly in the pantry so Marlene wouldn't see, where I made scrambled eggs at 2 a.m. because the silence in my room got too loud. But to Emily, it was aesthetic clutter, wallpaper to rip down. I walked in and stood by the fridge, watching her as she continued her call like I was a lamp in the corner. I might turn the back room into a wellness nook, maybe a space for breathwork circles. There's potential here. She was talking about my room. I cleared my throat. Are you planning to ask if we still live here, or just rearrange our lives between phone calls? Emily blinked up at me like she just noticed the furniture moved. Oh, Holly, don't be so tense. Nothing's changing yet. Yet, I repeated. She shut her laptop with a soft little snap, like she was folding up the truth. I'm just trying to bring some life back into this place. You've let it go gray. I almost laughed. Gray? You mean real. This house is real. Real floors, real problems, real memories. Not some backdrop for your internet therapy sessions. She tilted her head. See, that's the issue. You're stuck. You never left. No, I said, stepping closer. I stayed. That's different. Marlene wandered in just then, still in her slippers, acting like she hadn't heard the tension buzzing like a live wire. She poured herself coffee and said, "Girls, please, can't we just enjoy a few peaceful days?" I turned to her. Do you think this is peaceful? Having your name taken off the deed behind your back is peaceful? Her eyes dropped to her mug. It's not about that, Holly. It's about letting go. Letting go. Like this house wasn't soaked with the last 2 decades of my life. Like all the years I held her up, covered her gaps, carried her weight. That was just a prelude to the real show. Emily's return and her grand redesign. Emily smiled, small and polished. I'm not kicking you out. Not yet, I said, but we both know where this train's heading. She shrugged. If you want to make it harder than it has to be, that's your choice. And that was the moment something settled in me. Not rage, not panic. Clarity. They thought I'd sit quietly again. They thought I'd swallow it like every other time. But that day, I felt the snap. The final click of a lock. I walked past them without another word and stepped outside. The air was sharp, full of damp leaves and the scent of coming rain. I let it hit me like truth. This house wasn't hers. Not yet. And the story she was writing, I hadn't signed off on a single word. I started keeping the folder in my bag, not hidden, not locked away, just with me. Like a splinter, I refused to pull out. Some people carry pepper spray. I carried betrayal in 12 pages, neatly notarized, legally binding, signed in cursive by the woman who raised me and smiled while she did it. That week, I went to work like usual, smiled at the kids, helped Marcus tie his shoes even though he was 6 and insisted he knew how. I stayed late on Thursday to clean up after the art project Emily would have called clutter energy. And every time someone asked if I was okay, I said the same thing. I'm just tired, not a lie. Just not the whole truth. Back at home, Emily was blooming. That's the word that came to mind, like a flower someone watered with attention and zero accountability. She'd moved her ring light into the den, started calling it her production space. She bought new throw pillows online and announced it like we were partners in some renovation show. This color lifts the room, she said one morning, fluffing a mustard yellow cushion like it was royalty. It's a pillow, I muttered. Marlene was worse. She'd started repeating Emily's phrases, like her brain was sinking to a new frequency. Abundance. Reclaiming joy. Shared healing. I watched her sit at the kitchen table, nodding at Emily's plans like they were gospel. One night, I came home to find them both on the porch, sipping kombucha like it was champagne. Hey, Hall, Emily chirped. Mom and I were thinking of doing an energy clearing ceremony. You should join. I stared at them. You want to burn sage in the house I've been holding together with duct tape and prayers? Emily blinked. It's just symbolic. No, I said. What's symbolic is me scrubbing the bathroom floors while you add spiritual designer to your LinkedIn. Marlene shot me that look. That quiet, tired look that said, why can't you just go along with it? And I felt it again. That throb in my jaw. That slow burn under my ribs. Not rage, not even grief. Resentment, pure and sharp. They had rewritten the story, and in their version, I was the bitter footnote, the gray cloud, the one who couldn't keep up with the sparkle. But let me tell you something about being the one who stays. You see the mold under the tiles. You know which drawer sticks. You remember which window won't shut when it storms. And more importantly, you know where the receipts are. So I started gathering them: emails, maintenance logs, bills in my name, texts from Marlene asking for help, medical appointment records I scheduled, every forgotten piece of evidence that proved one thing. This house didn't run on sage and good vibes. It ran on me. And if they wanted to pretend otherwise, fine. But I was done playing nice in someone else's fantasy. They wanted a fresh start. They were about to get one, on my terms. And it wasn't going to smell like eucalyptus. It started with a drawer, the one in the hallway cabinet, second from the bottom. Stuck for years, unless you pulled it just right. Tilt the handle, tug slightly left, then yank. Dad taught me that move when I was 13. Emily never learned it. She was too busy being somewhere else. I opened it and pulled out the old accordion file folder, receipts from roofing repairs, a check stub from the time I covered Marlene's property taxes because she forgot, a warranty for the furnace I'd begged her to replace before winter. The paperwork smelled like dust and old decisions, but it was solid. It had dates, numbers, proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but holding it made me feel less like a ghost in my own house. A few days later, I heard Emily in the kitchen on speakerphone, voice elevated, performing. Yes, we'll begin renovations before winter. It's time to clear out what no longer serves this space. I stood in the hallway, clutching the file. What no longer served, that was me, right? I was the outdated appliance, the emotional wallpaper. I waited until she hung up, then stepped into the room. Planning a purge? I asked. Emily turned, startled just enough to betray she didn't expect me to fight back. Just setting intentions, she said. This place needs alignment. I tossed the file on the table with a solid thump. Papers slid out, utility bills, photos of mold under the bathroom sink, the contractor invoice from when the porch nearly collapsed. She blinked. What is all this? Evidence, I said. Documentation. Of who actually took care of this house? Emily scoffed. So what? You want credit? No, I said. I want truth. You keep acting like you manifested this place into existence. Like I didn't carry it on my back for the past 10 years. She opened her mouth, closed it. Marlene walked in at that exact moment, carrying a grocery bag like she hadn't just missed an earthquake forming in her dining room. What's going on? I looked at her, calm, tired but calm. I'm done pretending this is normal, I said. Done letting you hand off my life like it's some antique you don't want to dust anymore. Marlene set the bag down slowly. This isn't what I meant. I thought... You didn't think, I cut in. You decided, and you hoped I'd keep cleaning up after it. Emily folded her arms. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. The silence after that was different. Not awkward, not tense. Final. It settled into the walls, into the corners. Even the house seemed to go still. I looked at both of them, one clutching a narrative, the other clinging to convenience. And me, I had the proof, the past, and for the first time in a long time, the power. They didn't see it yet. Not fully, but they would. Because the part of me that used to beg for space, she wasn't in that house anymore. I was someone else now, and I was done waiting to be noticed. The shift was quiet, not dramatic, not cinematic, just different. Emily stopped bouncing into rooms like she owned the air. She started closing her laptop when I walked in. Marlene? She hovered, made more tea than usual, cleaned the same spot on the counter 3 times in one morning. Something in the house had tilted, and they felt it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam a single door, but every time I passed by Emily, I could see the question forming in her eyes. What is she planning? Let her wonder. I spent the next week organizing, not out of spite, out of clarity. I went through drawers, cabinets, email threads, everything I'd let slide for years while I was too busy being the steady one. I pulled out old bank statements where I covered the electric bill during Marlene's rough patch, screenshots of text messages that started with, "Can you spot me till Friday?" and ended in silence, doctor appointment receipts, prescription pickups, grocery lists with my handwriting in the margins, and Emily's name nowhere in sight. Every paper, every screenshot, every little thing they'd dismissed as just what Holly does, now sat in a folder that weighed heavier than it looked. One night, Marlene caught me in the kitchen. "You're not leaving, are you?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. I didn't look up from the table. "Should I?" She blinked. "You've always had a place here." That line. That line made me sit back and look her full in the face. "I made my place here," I said, "while you were too busy making excuses for someone who couldn't be bothered to show up." Marlene looked down, stirring her tea even though it had nothing left to dissolve. "She's trying," she whispered. "No," I said. "She's performing, and you're applauding." She flinched, just barely. But I saw it, and it hit me that this was maybe the first time I'd ever really spoken to her, not just agreed, or swallowed it down, or smiled through grit teeth. That night, I found Emily on the phone again, pacing the living room, her voice clipped. "I don't know, she's acting weird, like confident." I leaned against the doorway. "That's what happens when someone stops pretending," she spun around, startled. "You're listening to my calls now?" "No, just in the house I pay for." She rolled her eyes. "You're obsessed with playing the martyr," I smiled. "Better than the understudy." She laughed, but there was a wobble in it, a tiny fracture. "You think any of this matters?" "I know it does, because people like her forget the little things. But those little things, they add up. They build walls. They carry weight. And me? I'd been carrying it all. They just finally noticed. And for the first time, they didn't know what to do with me, because I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was sharpening, and the blade was almost ready. The knock came at 10:07 a.m. on a Thursday. I remember the time exactly because I was mid-sip on my first cup of coffee, the one I always reheated twice before finishing. And the house was so quiet, the knock sounded like it came from inside my chest. I opened the door to a man in a gray sport coat holding a clipboard and looking mildly apologetic. The kind of look you only get from someone about to drop a bomb with a smile. "Hi, you must be Holly. I'm with the county assessor's office, just following up on the property transfer recorded last month." My fingers tightened around the mug before I could stop them. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside and let him speak, because when someone walks into your life with a clipboard, you don't interrupt, you listen. He glanced around the house like it was already on a brochure. "Just standard procedure when there's a change in ownership. We're verifying residency and updating the file. Your name wasn't on the transfer, so we're confirming occupancy." I didn't blink. I didn't nod. I just said, "She's in the kitchen." Emily looked up from her smoothie bowl like she'd been caught shoplifting. She stood too fast, almost knocking her chair over. Hi," she said, adjusting her robe like that would somehow make her look more qualified to own a house. "Yes, I'm Emily, the new co-owner." "Co-owner?" I said, louder than I meant to. "That's interesting." The man raised an eyebrow. Emily smiled, that overly bright, tight-lipped smile that made me want to toss my coffee on the nearest plant. "Yes, it's a shared family space." He jotted something down and asked for a few documents, which Emily scrambled to find and couldn't. Because she hadn't been here. Because she didn't know where anything was. Because the last time she paid a bill, it was probably for a phone case. I stepped forward. "If you need records," I said, calm as steel, "I've got 10 years' worth. Utility bills, tax receipts, repairs, all in my name." He paused, pen in midair. "Are you a tenant?" Emily opened her mouth. I cut in. "No lease, no rent, just blood, sweat, and years no one counted." The room went still. He gave me a polite nod. "We'll make a note of that. Thank you for your time." And just like that, he left. Door shut. Silence returned. Emily whirled on me. "What are you doing?" "Reminding you this place doesn't run on sage and social media," I said, walking past her to refill my coffee. "You think it's yours because Mom signed a form, but paper doesn't build walls. I did." Marlene came in then, holding her robe closed like it was armor. "I told him what he needed to hear," Emily snapped. "You didn't have to humiliate me." I turned to Marlene. "You did this. You handed her keys to a house she doesn't even know how to unlock. And now?" You're watching her fumble and blaming me for lighting the room. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, lips tight, guilt forming in the corners of her eyes, but never reaching her mouth. And I realized something in that moment. They'd expected me to roll over, to sulk, to break quietly in the corner. But I wasn't breaking. I was documenting. Every insult, every oversight, every legally questionable move, and the fuse, it was already lit. Emily started spiraling the moment the door shut behind the assessor. Not loud. She never did loud. Her chaos came in passive-aggressive sighs, too loud typing and phone calls that always started with, "It's just exhausting." She spent the afternoon in what used to be the dining room, now converted into her workspace, lighting candles she couldn't pronounce, and blasting some ambient playlist that sounded like wind chimes and denial. I could hear every breathy exhale through the wall. By dinner, she'd made a full transformation, flowing white cardigan, crystals around her neck, a forced smile stretched across her face like it was glued there. "We need to talk," she said, as I set down 2 plates, because she hadn't cooked once since she arrived. I pulled out a chair and sat. "I'm listening." She folded her hands like a therapist in training. "I think you're holding on to something that doesn't serve you anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that your professional opinion as a whatever it is you do now?" "I'm serious, Holly," she said, her voice tight. "This tension, it's toxic, and Mom doesn't need that." "Toxic," I repeated. "You mean the part where I keep this house running while you float around calling yourself an intuitive strategist?" Her jaw clenched. "You've always been resentful. It's not my fault Mom sees potential in me." "She sees what she wants to see," I said. "You show up in linen pants and a dream catcher, and suddenly you're the golden child again." From the kitchen doorway, Marlene spoke, softly but clearly. "That's enough." We both turned. She looked tired, not sick, not weak, just worn out from the weight of pretending things weren't unraveling. "I didn't think it would come to this," she said, eyes darting between us. "I thought you'd figure it out." "You gave it to her," I said. "There was nothing to figure out," Emily cut in. "She trusted me with it because I have a vision." "No," I said, voice steady. "She handed it to you because you asked louder, because she thought I'd just keep folding the laundry and smiling through it." Marlene stepped further in, arms crossed but not defensive, defeated. "I didn't mean to pit you against each other. You didn't mean to. But you did." The table sat between us like a witness, my plate untouched, hers too. The food didn't matter anymore. "I've sacrificed for this house," I said, looking straight at Marlene. "Not just money, my time, my plans, my peace. And you didn't just ignore that. You erased it." Emily shook her head. "Why does everything have to be a fight with you?" "Because I stayed, Emily," I snapped. "Through the silent treatments, the holidays you skipped, the nights Mom couldn't get up the stairs. I stayed when it wasn't convenient. No one spoke, and in that silence, it finally landed. Not just for them, but for me, too. This wasn't about a house. It never was. It was about value, about presence, about all the invisible labor people like me do in the background, while others soak in the spotlight. And for once, I wasn't going to swallow that truth. I was going to serve it cold, plate by plate. Because the real ceremony wasn't sage and candles. It was reckoning, and it had just begun. The next morning, Emily was gone. Not gone. Her shoes were still by the door, and her "Gratitude Lives Here" mug was crusted with oat milk foam on the counter. But she wasn't in the house. No note, no text, no breathy voice memo explaining her location in 5 steps of emotional clarity. Just absence. Marlene sat at the kitchen table in her robe, nursing a cup of coffee like it might solve something. She didn't ask where Emily was. She just stared into her mug, eyes glazed, like they used to get after Dad's appointments, when the news was always manageable until it wasn't. I stood across from her, arms crossed, back against the counter. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was worse. It was polite. "She'll be back," Marlene finally said, not looking up. I nodded. "Probably," she paused. "You're not going to say, 'I told you so'?" "No," I said, "because you already knew." And that landed. I saw it in the way her shoulders dropped, in the way her fingers gripped the handle of the mug like it might float away. Later that afternoon, I walked past Emily's makeshift office. She'd left her laptop open. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There it was, an email draft, half-written, addressed to a real estate agent. Subject line, potential listing, family home, as is. No attachment, no photos. Just the outline of an exit plan, her exit plan, and none of us were in it. I didn't tell Marlene, not yet, not because I wanted to protect her, but because I needed a minute to feel it, to really absorb what it meant that, while I'd been running damage control, Emily had been looking for the escape hatch. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a beer I didn't even like. The air smelled like damp leaves and whatever the neighbors were burning in their backyard. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time I'd sat out there just to sit. No task, no fixing, just being. It felt foreign. The screen door creaked open behind me. Marlene stepped out slowly, like the porch might reject her. "I used to sit out here with your dad," she said, voice small. "He hated fall, said it made everything look like it was dying." He wasn't wrong. She looked at me, really looked. I messed up. It wasn't dramatic, no grand apology. Just 3 words wrapped in the kind of exhaustion that doesn't ask for forgiveness, just recognition. I didn't nod, didn't offer comfort. "Just let it hang there. Why her?" I asked finally. She took a long breath, held it, then let it out like she'd been carrying it for a year. "Because she made me feel needed," she said. You never needed me." I flinched, not because it was mean, but because it was true. I had learned to survive around her, to fill the gaps, solve the puzzles, carry the load without asking for credit. I didn't lean on her because I never thought she'd hold the weight. And now, we were here. 2 women on a porch in a house full of ghosts. No illusions left, no sugarcoating. "You ever gonna change the papers?" I asked, not looking at her. She didn't answer, but in that silence, I heard something shift. Not forgiveness, not surrender. Just the sound of the floorboards finally creaking beneath her feet. And that was a start. Emily came back Sunday morning. She waltzed through the front door like she hadn't spent 2 days vanishing into thin air, holding an iced latte and some vague sense of superiority. Sunglasses on, hair tucked neatly into a silk scarf, phone pressed to her ear like she was managing a crisis in another dimension. "I'm just going to take control of the situation," she said, breezing past the foyer. "People respect leadership." I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, waiting. She finally noticed me. "Oh," she said flatly, pulling off her sunglasses. "You're still here." I didn't answer, just stepped aside so she could move into the living room she still hadn't earned. She sat on the edge of the couch like she owned it, legs crossed, perfect posture. Marlene peeked around the corner a moment later, visibly relieved. "There you are," she said with a softness that stung more than it soothed. Emily shrugged. Had to reset. All this energy was suffocating. I looked at Marlene. "You gonna ask her where she's been?" "She's here now," Marlene said. "That's what matters." And just like that, we were back in the same loop. Emily disappeared. I stayed. She got a welcome. I got a shrug. But this time, I wasn't interested in the performance. I had bigger things in motion. Later that day, I made copies. 3 folders, color-coded, 1 for legal, 1 for financial, 1 labeled simply truth, receipts, records, proof. I walked into the kitchen where Marlene was stirring soup that smelled like it wanted to apologize for her. "Can we talk?" She nodded slowly, sat down at the table, tucking her sleeves like she was bracing for something. I slid the folders in front of her. "This is everything you've forgotten." She opened the first one, and her face shifted before she even hit page 3. Dates, bills, texts, photos, the surgery, the storm damage, the winter I stayed up every night because the heater kept breaking. "This is a lot," she said, voice small. "It's not even everything," I replied. Just enough to prove that while Emily was off chasing light and alignment, I was the one holding this house together with borrowed money and Band-Aids. Marlene closed the folder. "Why now?" "Because I'm not asking anymore," I said. "I'm showing you." I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just showed up, like I always had. But this time, with more than words. With the kind of weight paper carries when it's filled with years of being invisible. She looked at me for a long time. I couldn't read her expression, but I didn't need to. I hadn't brought the folders for her approval. I brought them because I knew what was coming, and this time, when it hit, I wanted everything on record, because silence might protect peace. But documentation? That protects the truth, and I was done letting the story be written without me. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. No warning, no heads up, just a plain white envelope with my name printed clean across the front in black ink. No return address, no emotion. Inside, a formal notice from Emily's attorney, intent to renovate, request for voluntary vacate within 60 days to begin construction. I read it twice, then once more. Each time the words felt less like legal language and more like a knife slowly twisting. I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope limp in my hand like it had already done its damage. The hallway clock ticked louder than it needed to. Outside, a leaf blower growled in someone's yard, completely indifferent to the fact that my life had just been pushed to the edge of the porch with a nice little bough on top. She didn't say it to my face. Of course not. She hired someone else to do her dirty work. I walked into the kitchen and placed the letter on the table right in front of Marlene, who looked up from her crossword like I'd just dropped a brick in her lap. She scanned it, once, then again. Her lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. "She's evicting me," I said, voice flat. "In 60 days. Marlene shook her head. "No, she wouldn't." "She did. She already did. And don't act surprised." Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the paper again, reading slower this time, as if that might soften the edges. It didn't. "She's not even here half the time," I continued. "But she's got no problem hiring someone to kick me out of the only place I've ever had roots." "She must think," Marlene started. "No," I said. "She doesn't think. She decides, she assumes, and she bets on you to smooth it over after." Silence. Not the kind that offers peace, just absence. A void where an answer should have been. "She told me she wouldn't," Marlene said quietly. "And you believed her?" I replied. "Because you always do." I left the letter on the table and walked out. I didn't need another half-hearted apology or another teacup conversation about how things got complicated. They weren't complicated. They were deliberate. Back in my room, I sat down and opened my laptop. I pulled up every document, every file, every scan I'd compiled, the receipts, the maintenance reports, the medical appointments, the timestamps, the email exchanges, the real story. Then I did the thing none of them saw coming. I booked an appointment with a notary. Because if they wanted this to be about paperwork, fine, I had paperwork too. Years of it, and I was done treating this like a family misunderstanding. It wasn't a miscommunication, it was a move, and now it was my turn to make one. The notary's office looked different this time. Same building, same frosted glass, same tired ficus leaning like it gave up somewhere in 2016. But I wasn't the same person who walked in last month with a manila folder and a stomach full of doubt. This time, I walked in with a file thick enough to make a dent. Years of documentation, every bill, repair, deposit, and decision. Every sacrifice made invisible. Every time I'd shown up when no one else did. The woman behind the desk glanced at my appointment name, then at me. "Are you the owner?" "No," I said, smiling just enough. "But I'm about to be." It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the house anymore. It was about being erased and choosing not to be. I signed what I needed to. Quietly, carefully. The paperwork wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was legal, binding, real. By the time I walked out, the October air hit different. Cold, but sharp in a way that wakes you up. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear, adrenaline, truth, power that finally had somewhere to land. Back at the house, Emily was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with mood music playing and a bundle of sage in her hand like it could ward off the consequences. She looked up. I saged the hallway. The energy was thick. "Yeah," I said, dropping my bag on the table. "That happens when someone tries to evict their sister and pretend it's spiritual growth. She stood. "You're still upset?" "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm documenting." Her face changed just slightly, like she wasn't sure if I was joking. I wasn't. Marlene walked in a few minutes later with groceries, her eyes darting between us like she could feel the temperature drop before anyone said a word. "Everything okay?" she asked. I opened my folder and pulled out a printed document. Plain, neat, boring to anyone who didn't know what it meant. "I filed a petition," I said, sliding it across the table, "for beneficial interest and quiet title." Emily squinted at the page. "What is this?" "It's what happens when someone who's lived in and maintained a property for over a decade decides not to be written out of their own life." Marlene sat slowly, lips parted. "You're suing us?" Emily snapped. "No," I said, calm as the kitchen floor under my feet. "I'm clarifying and protecting and putting every ugly little truth on the record where it belongs." Emily stepped forward. "You're making this into a war." "No," I said. "You already did. I'm just showing up with armor." And that's when I saw it. Not panic, not guilt. Fear. For the first time since she walked back into this house with her scented candles and charm, Emily looked unsure. Because people like her only win when you stay quiet, when you doubt your right to be angry, when you believe that being the good one means giving up everything without a fight. But I wasn't the good one anymore. I was the one holding the ledger, and I wasn't closing the book. Not yet. The court date came quicker than anyone expected. Not a dramatic trial, just a hearing in a plain government building with beige walls and a clock that ticked too loud. But for me, it might as well have been a cathedral, a place where silence finally cracked open and said something back. Emily showed up in a tailored blazer, hair done, a neutral expression pasted across her face like a sticker that wouldn't quite stick. She clutched a slim folder, probably filled with whatever her lawyer prepped last minute. I came with my records, my years, my truth, indexed, dated, and signed. Marlene sat in the back. No cardigan, no scarf. Just quiet. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She didn't look at Emily either. She looked down. The way people do when the reality they've built starts caving in. The judge asked basic questions. Who lived there? Who paid what? Who shoveled snow at 6 a.m. and sat by the hospital bed when the coughing wouldn't stop? My answers were calm, not cold, measured, real. I didn't have to exaggerate. I just had to tell the story straight, the way it always happened. And when they asked Emily, she blinked, twice, fumbled with her papers. I've contributed in other ways," she said. "I brought value." "What kind of value?" the judge asked. Emily paused. "Emotional." Even her lawyer looked down. I don't remember the exact words the judge used, but the gist was this. The situation lacked formal structure, but long-term contribution mattered. Consistency mattered. Intent mattered. He didn't hand me a medal. He handed me legal acknowledgement, recognition that I wasn't just staying in the house. I was keeping it alive. After the hearing, Emily stormed out. Didn't speak, didn't flinch. The sound of her heels in the hallway said everything. I stepped outside and sat on the courthouse steps. Cold breeze, too much traffic, sky gray like it couldn't decide whether to rain or not. And then I heard the door creak behind me. Marlene. She didn't sit right away, just stood for a second, like she was checking if she had permission. Then slowly she lowered herself beside me. No words, just presence. For a while, we watched the cars pass, people going somewhere, carrying coffee cups and arguments and grocery lists. Life, just happening, without ceremony. "I thought giving her the house would give her roots," she said at last. I nodded. She wasn't planting anything, just visiting. Marlene exhaled. "You deserve better than how I handled this." "I know." Another pause. Not awkward, earned. "I can fix the paperwork," she added quietly. I looked at her, not with anger, not with hope. Just clarity. "You don't have to," I said. "It's already done." The fight was never really about the deed. It was about the difference between being used and being seen. And now, I was. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I took the long way, the hard way. The way that builds things no one sees until they stand in a courtroom and try to claim what was never theirs to begin with. I didn't win. I proved I was never losing. And that, finally, was enough. Esteto. Emily didn't come back to the house. Not for her books, not for her plants, not even for that crystal water pitcher she claimed held ancestral memory. One day, her stuff was just gone. A moving truck rolled up around noon while I was at work. Marlene didn't even tell me, just left a voicemail that said, "She's taking her things." That was it. No goodbye, no speech, no final scene, just a blank space where her echo used to be. At first, it felt like relief, like air finally returned to a room that hadn't breathed right in months. But underneath that, if I'm honest, there was a flicker of something else. Not sadness, not grief, just the strange, disorienting quiet that follows a storm you spent too long bracing for. The days that followed were slow, not empty, just real. Dishes, laundry, mail, morning coffee that didn't come with side eyes and passive-aggressive affirmations. I started eating breakfast on the porch again. Sometimes Marlene joined me, sometimes she didn't. We didn't speak much at first, not about what happened, but the silence shifted. It wasn't loaded anymore. It was permission to be, to breathe. One evening, I came home and found a piece of paper on the kitchen counter, a new deed draft. My name on it, just mine. It wasn't signed. She didn't hand it to me. She just left it there, beside a pot of soup and a note that said, "Can we eat together tonight?" We did, and in that quiet meal, I saw her. Not the version of Marlene I'd been chasing approval from since I was 13. Not the one who defaulted to Emily's sparkle, the real one. Worn down, older, softer in places I didn't expect. A woman who finally saw the damage she let happen. After we ate, she sat back in her chair, hands folded. Looked at me long and hard. "You know I don't deserve forgiveness," she said. I didn't answer right away. Because forgiveness isn't a word I throw around like keys in a bowl. It's not automatic. It's not owed. It's earned. Or sometimes not. "I'm not giving you anything," I said, "but I'm not carrying it anymore either." She nodded like she understood, and I think she did. Some nights, I still hear the house creak in the dark, not with ghosts, not with grief, just the sound of something old settling back into itself. And for the first time in years, I sleep all the way through. Because this house, it doesn't just belong to me on paper, it's mine in all the ways that count. The funny thing is, after everything, the house got quiet. Not the awkward, tiptoeing kind of quiet we used to have when Emily was here, floating through rooms like she was too enlightened for door frames. This was different. It was full, like the silence you earn after finishing something hard. Not perfect, but peaceful. One morning, I fixed the hallway drawer, the one that always stuck, the one Dad taught me to open just right. I pulled it all the way out, sanded the edge, reset the track. Took maybe 15 minutes, but when it finally slid back in smooth, I stood there for a long time, hand on the handle, just breathing. It was small, but it meant something. Marlene started planting again. Not anything big, just herbs in the kitchen window. Basil, thyme, a little mint that kept wilting but never quite gave up. She'd talk to the plants while making coffee, sometimes not noticing I was in the room. I didn't interrupt. There was something healing in that mundanity. We didn't have long, emotional conversations. That wasn't us. But there were these moments, small ones, honest ones. Like when she quietly handed me the login for the property tax account and said, "You should probably be listed first now." Or when she brought me tea after a long day, didn't say anything, just placed it beside me on the porch, sat down, and watched the sky with me, like we both remembered what silence used to feel like, and chose to rewrite it. Emily texted once. Just once. It was short. I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. "I'm sorry." I read it twice. Didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was done waiting for her to become someone she was never going to be. She made her choices, and now I was making mine. I spent one whole Saturday clearing out the attic. There were boxes up there from before I was born. Baby clothes, old holiday lights, dusty cookbooks with notes in the margins. I found a photo of Marlene in her 20s, holding Dad's hand, smiling like she hadn't yet learned how hard life could be. I kept that photo, not for her, for me, to remind myself that people are complicated, and sometimes the ones who break you also built the floor you stand on. One evening, I walked past the mirror in the hallway, the same mirror I used to avoid when things felt too heavy. This time, I stopped. I looked older, stronger, not hard, just anchored, like I'd finally stepped into my own outline. And in that reflection, I saw a woman who didn't beg to be chosen, who didn't need applause for staying, who built something steady with nothing but grit and coffee spoons. The house didn't shine, but it stood. And so did I.